Hello my loyal companions, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be looking at some of the upcoming changes to the rogues in Rogue Company when the first season officially drops in the first week of February. There's quite a few nerfs, buffs, adjustments and small reworks added to the rogues within the game. It will be really informational for you to know now before you get into it. If you do go on to enjoy the video or you just want to see daily, educational Rogue Company content, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel, but for now, let's get into it. Just a reminder that all this information comes from the PTS server, which is where they test future updates on a different server before it goes to the main live ones. That does mean that some of this information may be subject to small change, but I do not think so. Based on testing it, it seems all pretty solid, and I imagine they're going to go ahead with this information. To give you guys an idea of some of the things you're going to see from these rogue changes when we get into the video, is we're looking at an Anvil bug fix, Lancer nerf, Phantom small rework, Ronin buff, Saint small rework, Scorch nerf, Trench small rework, and then a nerf to the MXR which will affect both Trench and Dahlia. And then we're also going to be looking at a D3DI buff which will affect Talon and Fixer. So let's jump into it by first talking about Anvil, and this is just going to be a small little bug fix where his shield has not been able to be placed properly in every situation, and that is now being adjusted for in the next patch, so it'll be a little bit more solid for us to use in game, which I'm really happy with because I've been finding it kind of annoying using a shield recently when you can't place it down in areas you definitely should be able to. Now looking at the Lancer nerf, this is a very small change which should hopefully appease some of the community and competitive community who've been asking for her to be changed because they feel like she's too strong. I personally do not think she is in that bad of a state and can remain fairly the same, but what they've decided to do is increase the cooldown of her ultimate recharge from 30 seconds to 45 seconds, so she probably won't be able to use it as frequently within the game. They have also changed it so it no longer prevents her from being seen on the minimap when she uses it. This is particularly important because that means it will no longer counter Talon Dart, which personally I do not think it ever should have, and I'm glad that this change is in here as well. Now Talon is a lot more of a solid counter to Lancer because you can put his dart on the flank and watch it using that information. Overall, I'm happy with the Lancer change. I think it is a small nerf that will hopefully appease some of the community, but is not a massive nerf to take her completely out of the game, and the Talon counter I think is a great addition as well. Now we'll move on to Phantom. This is one that is particularly interesting in my opinion, and honestly, she may be really meta because of this. The Phantom change is very simply, they're removing the Aaron L212, the DMR, and replacing it with the Nightshade, which is the assault rifle that Vi has. In my opinion, the Nightshade is one of the best weapons in the game, especially if you're a skilled player, and now adding this onto Phantom, who has, with accompanying it, the life drain perk, the tracker rounds perk, her smoke grenades, her sticky sensor, and just a great kit generally, I think she's going to be incredibly strong. She can absolutely tear through, and when playing on the PTS, or coming across Phantoms using this, they were absolutely able to slay out, particularly because of that life drain perk, which is such a priority in that sort of situation. It completely changes the relevance of that rogue, and as a lot of the community and myself think, she's going to be a very good flex pick, whereby you can pick her in a team, and based on what the enemy team pick, you can then choose whether you want to go Nightshade or Sniper, both of which are incredibly great weapons and impactful in their own ways. I think this change is going to really bring her back into the fold, and honestly, I'm going to be playing her a lot because of this, because I love the Nightshade, and I think her kit and perks and sort of equipment really benefit now from her being a frag out playstyle. Now moving on to Ronin, who's getting a small buff to her ballistic knife, where now sticking somebody with it, so directly hitting them, will now do 250 damage as opposed to the 125 it did before. This means it will completely shred through tenacity and headstrong, and it will also kill Shark once he's overhealed. I think this is actually a really good change because it is difficult to hit that knife, and for an ability, it really should do impactful damage like that. Whereas like the Katana, if you hit somebody with it and with the full upgrade, even if they have 125 health, they're 100% dead. With Ronin's knife, because it's an explosive damage, tenacity countered it really well, and now it won't, which I think is very important for the ability and actually a really good change. There is one other change to Ronin though, and that is with her weapon, the SLC, where it's getting a small buff in that its vertical recoil has been reduced, and this will also affect Scorch as we look at her in a moment. Before that though, we're going to look at Saint and his small rework, which is very interesting. You may have heard me talk about here on the channel or on Twitter before. The change is pretty simple. The trip mines that he has as part of his gadgets are now being removed, and he's having C4 replaced instead. This is a very good piece of equipment, the C4, and will really help him when he's getting pushed. because he tends to have longer range weapons, and therefore being pushed puts him under a bit of pressure. However, that is not the only change that's happening to Saint, and this one is going to affect his weapon, the M4 assault rifle, and is going to be really sort of different for players who are used to Saint. What's happening now is his damage from it is being reduced by 1, but they're removing the scope from it, so it is now a third-person weapon, not a first-person aim-down sight scoped weapon. This will really change the dynamic of the game, and with the removal of the arrow, that means the only scoped weapons are the snipers from now on. Personally, I really enjoyed the scope. I really liked the difference that it added to the game, and I was finding it quite good just to switch between them and adjust. I didn't find that as a big problem, but I know a lot of people did. But with the scope being removed now, I've used it. It does not feel very strong. It actually feels kind of weaker, and I know they reduced the damage, but it just doesn't feel as impactful as it did, whereas I felt like it melted before. Now it doesn't as much, but I still think it's a good contender. I would put it very similar in sort of level to the KA-30, maybe just a little bit weaker in my personal opinion, but with more playtime, potentially we'll get used to it a little bit more because the hipfire is really good. Now looking at the Scorch change, this is a buff slash nerf in the fact the nerf is that similar to Lancer, her ability cooldown is being increased from 30 seconds to 45 seconds, so it's less impactful in between the rounds of the game. But she will also have the same buff as Ronin, whereby her SLC is getting a vertical recoil reduction, so it'll be a little more stable from the vertical recoil. Another small change to some weapons will be the D3DI, the Deadeye, which is for Talon, and for Fixer as their DMRs. This is getting a small change as well. It's having a damage increase with its body damage going from 34 to 38, and its headshot damage at the closest range going from 54 to 58. So this is quite a decent buff in terms of damage, and won't affect it at the closest range as much, but will affect it in that mid to long range, where it will now be a little bit better and probably one less shot in some situations to get it down, just giving it that little bit extra of a buff, which it potentially needed. I always felt like it was more of a poke weapon than a high damage dealing weapon, and so therefore this buff should help it go in line just a little bit with that. It's also having its damage fall off increased at the maximum ranges as well. Now though, the last rogue we're going to touch on with his mini rework, and actually quite substantial rework honestly, is going to be to Trench. The first thing is that the MXR is getting a small nerf or adjustment which will affect him and Dahlia, in that the fire rate was somewhat bugged, so it was kind of inconsistent. That is now being leveled out at 4.7, though a lot of people are saying this feels kind of slow, but that would make sense if it was bugged increasing the fire rate. Now it is just stable. It's also getting a damage reduction. Its body damage is going from 32 to 30, and its headshot damage is going from 48 to 44, which is quite substantial, and you might be finding that it takes one extra shot in some situations to get it down, and this may appease some of the community who think the MXR is still really strong, and honestly I agree it is a really strong weapon. I don't think it will change it that much though, maybe just again that mid-range and long range, where that damage fall off is felt a little bit more. These specific changes to Trench though are to do with his barbed wire. Instead of having one large barbed wire that covers a 9-meter area, he's now having 2 smaller 4-meter barbed wires that he can throw down, so he has 2 of them that he can use. This will really help against things like glitch hack and then breaking them, but the breaking of it has also changed now that you cannot punch the barbed wire. You cannot break it by punching it, therefore you have to use some form of utility to do it, and I think this is going to be good because it forces players to use that utility to stop the barbed wire or risk being slowed the entire time. I really do like this change, and I think it will help Trench, although the smaller radius will also kind of be like a counter nerf to it, although it does work for the balancing purposes. I think it'll just be really good in those close quarters such as Icarus A site, where that barbed wire will be so impactful and force them to use a piece of utility instead of just punching it out very easily. Of course, the new update for Season 1 will also bring with it the new rogue Kestrel, and if you're interested in seeing her in a full gameplay, you can check out this video on the channel that you see on screen here, where I do talk about her kit and show her in-game. The only other change that will affect a lot of the rogues is that the execution is getting a small nerf as well to the fall-off damage at the maximum ranges. Is getting slightly reduced, but that really won't be that impactful. It's actually a reverse nerf of what they buffed a few patches ago, so we really won't feel much of a difference about it. But generally, those are the changes for the rogues coming up in the next update and the first official season of Rogue Company on the first week of February. Again, a disclaimer that these may be subject to small changes before that patch actually goes live, but I really doubt it'll be anything impactful, and these are the changes we're likely going to see to the rogues going forward. And I really want to know what you think down in the comments, so let me know. Tell me what you think about all the rogues, how you think the changes, who you think the strongest one is going to be, who you think is going to be nerfed kind of bad and they might be a little bit useless now. Let me know what you think about the meta and the shifts you might see coming up in the future down in the comments. Okay then guys, that takes us to the end of the video, and if you did enjoy, Make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also come follow me on twitch.tv/RADTHARGAMING to see live gameplay commentaries, guides, Q&As, and playing with viewers. If you're buying anything from the Epic Games Store, whether it be Rogue Company Rogue Bucks or anything from any other Epic Games, make sure you use my creator code RADTHARGAMING at checkout to help support this channel with no extra cost to yourself. All the links you're going to need are down in the description below, but for now guys, I hope you have a fantastic day. And remember, be loyal, be brave, be relentless, and I'll catch you in the next video.